Welcome back to the fifth part of the Flutter YouTube Search tutorial course. In the previous part, we've added the state management layer, which in our case is a BLoC. We already have the means to start searching for YouTube videos and also to utilize pagination so that we download all of the data at once. Now that we have all that, we need to create a UI to display this data in. In this part, you are going to learn how to create custom Flutter widgets, like for example this search field up top in the emulator, and also how to work with a BLoC from the UI by using BLoC Provider. You're also going to learn how to use the Kiwi dependency injection library in Flutter, and then in the next part you're going to learn how to implement the paginated list view. Hello, welcome to ResoCoder, and let's start off right with main.dart file, which is the main file, the entry point for our Flutter app. And we currently have a default kind of an app here. So we want to delete everything which is my home page, which is a widget we are not going to use, and also its state, so my home page state, and the home will be a different kind of widget, so we can delete even this from the material app. Let's delete all of these comments as well, and we are left with a bare bones material app. Now in the already finished app, you can see that the primary color is red, and also the accent color will be red too. So let's set everything up. We are even going to set the brightness to be light. Currently we have set the primary swatch, but we want to select only one certain color, and that will be shade 600 of red. So we cannot set primary swatch, but rather primary color. So red shade 600, and accent color will be set to red accent and shade 400. We want to set the home page to be the search page, which we currently don't have. So let's create search page under UI search. This is the same package which holds the BLoC. Search page will be a stateful widget, so stful search page. And let's import material.dart so that we don't have all of these errors. It's currently broken, but that doesn't matter. We are going to come back to it later. For now, let's just set this search page as home widget for our material app, and there we go. The first thing that we want to do in the search page is to get the BLoC, which is the search block. And if we take a look at the search block class, we can see that it takes in a YouTube repository. YouTube repository in turn takes into its constructor a YouTube data source. So it's basically a dependency tree. Now we could certainly just create dependencies directly inside search block as we are, or inside search page, as we are requesting these kind of dependencies for this search page. So we are requesting search block, into it we would pass search or YouTube repository, and into that repository we would directly pass the data source. But that's not a good way to do it, because we can utilize a framework, dependency injection framework, called Kiwi, which will do that instantiating and passing of dependencies for us. So let's do just that. We have already imported the Kiwi library in the first part of this tutorial series. So now all that we can do is to create a separate file right under main.dart. It's gonna be called injection container. And over here, let's import Kiwi, and let's give it the nickname Kiwi. And now this file will hold only one top level function called initKiwi. We'll call this function from main.dart as soon as we are running the main function here. So let's even call it right now. We are going to change this one statement function into a classic function. So let's add curly braces all over the place. And before we say run app, we want to init Kiwi. So let's import our injection container.dart. And now whenever the app is launched, we are going to initialize Kiwi beforehand. Inside init Kiwi, we want to let the Kiwi library know which classes have which kind of dependencies. we're going to do that by calling things on Kiwi.container, which is a singleton instance, by the way. And on it, let's use the cascading operator, so 2 dots, and we want to register instance. The first instance which we are going to register is HTTP client, so let's import http.dart as HTTP, and this instance will therefore be http.client. Now, after we have registered that instance, we want to also register factory. The difference between factories and instances in Kiwi is that factories get passed a container instance over here, so I will show you what that does. Basically, C of type container is passed into here, and we can use this container to resolve already registered dependencies. So this factory will register for us YouTube data source. So let's import that. And YouTube data source, as you remember, requires an HTTP client. So now we can pass this HTTP client over here by calling c.resolve, and Kiwi will figure out which kind of a dependency we want to pass over here, and it's going to infer that YouTube data source takes in something of type client, and it already has registered HTTP client, so it's going to pass this instance of HTTP client registered just one line above over to YouTube data source. Similarly, we want to register YouTube repository and also the search block. Also remember that you can get the code from this tutorial from the link in the video description, which is gonna take you to resocoder.com. Now let's go to searchpage.dart. Let's import Kiwi even over here and nickname it Kiwi, so as Kiwi. And we are going to get the search block from Kiwi's container. So we are going to create a final field, search block, and we are going to get it by calling Kiwi container resolve, and we want to get search block from there. At this point, I would really recommend you to watch my previous tutorials which deal with the block directly. You can check that tutorial out from the card in the corner, because in that tutorial I will explain BLoC really in depth. Over here in this fifth part of this tutorial series in which we are building the YouTube Flutter search tutorial app, I'm not really going to explain the BLoC library so in depth. So if you want to learn about it, just check out the tutorial. It's not all that long, and you're going to be really well versed in the BLoC terminology and why we are doing what we are doing and so on. With that out of the way, let's now implement the build function. We don't want to return a container, but we rather want to return a BLoC provider. This is from Flutter BLoC, which we need to import manually, so it seems. So import BLoC flutterblock.dart. BLoC provider takes in a block, which in our case will be search block, which is the private field, and also it takes in a child, which it should build and pass this block over to that child. What the BLoC provider does is that it's basically an inherited widget, and if you are already familiar with Flutter's inherited widget, they basically allow the children, which are below this current widget in the widget tree, to get some data from its parent. So whenever a child of this search page will want to call something on search block, we do not need to pass this instance of search block over to that child through a constructor. That child, for example, our search bar over here, this will be a separate kind of widget, this top search bar in which I'm currently deleting letters. This will be a separate widget, and whenever this search bar will want to, for example, search for resocoder on YouTube, it wants to call a BLoC function to dispatch the search event, right? This search field up top will be able to do that really simply by utilizing this BLoC provider. This child will be a scaffold, and let's immediately move it to a separate function which will be called build scaffold, but it will be private. And before we forget about it, let's also implement the dispose function, which is pretty important. And over here we want to dispose of the search block. So search block.dispose. This way we are not going to use unnecessary memory, and we are not going to get unnecessary nasty memory leaks. Inside the scaffold, as soon as we make this function a classic looking function with curly braces, let's start off with the app bar. So the app bar will be a classic kind of an app bar. What's interesting about this app bar is its title. Title doesn't need to be a text. It's in fact a widget, so we can pass anything inside as the title. So in our case, we are going to pass in the search bar, but at first we are going to write it in line, and only then we are going to move it into its own separate widget. And you will see why we move it inside a separate widget, because otherwise this whole scaffold would be a huge mess, because the search bar is a pretty long code. So it's gonna be a container. We want it to have rounded corners, like you can see right now. And rounded corners can be done through a decoration of the container. It's gonna be a box decoration. Also, its background will be white, so we can set color to be colors.white. And then the rounded corners can be done through border radius. And the border radius will be simply a class border radius dot circular, and the radius which we want to have here is 5 units. This is only the styling of the container, but we also want the container to have a child, which will be the actual search field in which we can type. Let's now actually run this app inside an emulator, so let's hit F5. And also sometimes it just decides that it wants to run all of the tests. So if something like that happens, we can just stop the tests. And it didn't even run all of them for some reason. So let's just ignore that and go over to the debug tab and switch from run all tests to just Flutter. And now you can hit this green start debugging button, and it's actually going to run the app inside the emulator correctly right now. So this is how it looks now. It doesn't look at all good, but we are going to change it later on in this part. For now, let's just already move this container to its separate widget. So we are going to hit Control and dot character and extract widget. Its name will be search bar. It's gonna move it directly under the search page, right inside this search page file. We can leave it like that for now, and then we are going to move it even inside its own separate file. For now, let's move inside this container, and the child of this container will be a text field, which will also have a decoration, because decoration is needed for hint text, and the hint text will say search videos. And this decoration cannot be box decoration, but rather input decoration. So hint text will be search videos. And let's actually take a look at how it looks like right now. So it looks better. This background is not placed directly to the edges of the app bar, but the text looks kind of funny. It also, I don't know if you can see it on YouTube properly, but it also has this classic underline under it, which is black. So let's modify it a bit. We are going to set the border of this input decoration to be input border dot none. We also want to have a nice icon at the left, so we can set the icon to be icon, and it's going to be icons.search, and the color of the icon will be colors.black, but we don't want to have just straight out black, but we want to have a lower opacity, so we're going to say with opacity, and that opacity will be half, so 0.5. Now let's take a look at how it looks like. So we have a nice looking search bar, but it's completely non-functional because we cannot do anything in here. And for it to be fully functional, we need to add quite a bit of code to make it happen. So even with this text field, it will be the best if we move it inside its own separate widget. So let's extract widget and let's call it search field. Alright, let's remove this new keyword so that we have consistent usage of this new keyword, because we do not use it, because Dart 2.0 doesn't require us to use it, so let's not use it anywhere. And while we are at it, let's also add a padding to this search field. So add padding, and we want to add padding only from the left side, and it will not be 8 but only 5. And now let's take a look at how this app looks like in the emulator. So now the padding is there and it looks a bit better. Now this search field is not all that hard to implement actually, it's just that we want to add some additional functionality to it, which will be a bit tricky. But the core functionality, which is basically that it should submit something to the search block, is really simple. We just want to add an submitted function over here, which will pass us a text, which will be search query in our case. And whenever something is submitted in the text field, which means that we hit the enter button on this keyboard, so just do that. We want to pass this search query through the onSearchInitiated event inside the search block. And now, because we are using a block provider over here, even though that we are in a deeply nested widget, because we have two levels of nesting, right? We have this search bar, and then this search bar contains search field, and only inside this search field, we want to call something on the block. Because of that block provider, we can just call simply block provider of context, and we want to get hold of search block. And now on this search block, we can just simply call onSearchInitiated and pass in the search query, if I could type, and everything is going to work. The only thing that is not going to work is the actual displaying of the results, because we have not yet implemented the paginated list view. But definitely subscribe to this channel if you don't want to miss the next part, because in the next part we are actually going to implement it. And in the meantime, you can watch a separate tutorial about how to implement the paginated list view in a simple demo app, which will teach you that paginated list view really in depth. So check it out from the card in the corner. But for now, as I said, we don't have any kind of a paginated list view, so we are not gonna be able to see these results, but it actually calls the block. So when we search for ResoCoder even here, and hit this button, it's going to search for it. The data will be returned in this model format from JSON. It will be converted from JSON to YouTube search results. So this is already happening in the background, but we cannot see it yet. That tricky kind of a functionality about which I was talking previously about is that now we have this text field completely unfocused, unselected. What we want to have whenever we click on an unfocused text field is that its text will be completely selected for us. Currently, that doesn't happen. But what we want to do is to actually select the whole text like this whenever we, whenever we just click on this search field. We can do that by adding two fields inside search field widget, but actually before that we need to convert search field to a stateful widget. So this way it will know about its state, and we'll be also able to use init state, because from stateless widgets we cannot use the init state kind of a life cycle function. So that's why we need a stateful widget here. And now let's add those two fields over to the search field state. They are controller and also focus node. The controller is simply text editing controller. Focus node can tell us whenever a widget gets a focus. So whenever we click on a widget, it's in focus. In order for this focus node to notify us about these kinds of changes, let's implement the init state function. And inside here, let's call focus node.add listener. And here we want to check if focus node has focus. We are going to select the whole text through this text editing controller, because text editing controller basically allows us to programmatically control what is going on with the text field. So we want to write controller.selection, and the selection will be text selection. The base offset will be 0, extent offset will be controller.text.length. So basically from the start to the end, right? Now just let the Dart formatter format this code for us. And now the only thing left to do is to set the controller and focus node properties in the constructor of the text field. So let's do that right now. And now when we go over to our app in the emulator and we try to search for videos, for example, ResoCoder again, and we hit this submit button, and now when we click on this search field, its content will be automatically selected for us. So let's search for, I don't know what, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Again, let's submit this string, this query string, and now when we hit this search field, it's gonna be selected. And that's it for this tutorial. In this part, you learned how to create a custom widget, which is this search field on the top. And in the next part, we are going to create the paginated list view. So subscribe to this channel and also definitely hit the bell button so that you become a part of the notification squad so that you don't miss any of my new videos, including this next one. If this video helped you, give it a like and also share it with others. Leave a comment if you have anything to say. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. And see you in the next video.